Hello, and welcome to the Convention of States Michigan podcast. I am your host, Robin Riddell. We have got I think, fun topic for you tonight. We're going to talk about Article 5, Convention of States. Here is the premise. Would a Convention of States, Article 5 Convention, be good or bad for the Second Amendment? Now, I would love to give you the short answer and give you my answer, but we'd miss out on this whole discussion. And besides, we would like you to decide. We want to give you the information and let you decide on this. I'm going to open up my chat over here in a few moments. If you're watching, please type into the chat on whichever platform you are. At least give us a city, give us a shout out, let us know where you're from. Let's make sure that chat's working, because as we get going, you're going to have questions and we want to answer them. So if you put them in the chat, I'll be watching for them and we will try to address every one of your questions. I've got guests tonight, and my first guest is actually a guest co-host. Let me bring in everybody. Meet Chet Grant. Chet is a region captain here in Michigan. His territory is the east side of the state, north of Wayne County, and all the way up almost to Alpena and kind of over to the middle. How close did I get, Chet?
Reasonably close.
Okay. So before we bring in our other guests, I would like you to address the question. You are often out meeting the public. You do other radio interviews. You conduct town halls. And this question comes up from time to time. So quick answer, what would you tell people?
Well, I think, as you know, the way Convention of States in the Article 5 is written, we always take the position, which is true, that there's no way that an Article 5 Convention of States is even going to touch the Second Amendment. So you could make the argument that there's no connection whatsoever between Article 5 Convention of States and the Second Amendment. And I say that because the three things we're focused on are term limits, fiscal accountability, and reduced government size and scope. So that limits and specifically focuses the effort on those three subject areas, okay? So now I can also make an argument that Convention of States, Article 5 Convention of States could benefit the Second Amendment when you start to look at fiscal areas of focus when we do this, because as you deal with the money, you can then begin to deal with the unelected bureaucracy. And one of the controlling agencies in that bureaucracy is the ATF. So you could make a case, maybe a weak one, but you could make a case that the Second Amendment could be strengthened out of a Convention of States.
Well, I want to jump into that. We've got a couple of more guests that I would like to bring in. First, let me introduce. This is Dave Suloff. Say hi, Dave.
Hi, Dave.
Dave is a district captain in the southwest corner of the state. And I would also like to bring in our third guest. And this is Travis Grant. Hello, Travis.
Hello.
Now, for those of you paying attention, you might notice there's a little crossover here in names. Travis and Chet, father and son. And Travis, when I first started talking about doing this podcast, word got back to me by way of your family that you were very interested in being part of this discussion. And you and I have spoken a little bit. And I'd like you to share why you are passionate about this topic and how you see a convention of states, Article 5 convention, affecting this.
So I kind of grew up around guns. Hunting is a big part of what I do, and that just kind of turned into a passion for everything firearms, whether that's shooting them, learning the history, making them. I kind of like to do all of that, and I would like to continue to keep doing that. And as Nick said, specifically this convention of states, what we're trying to do here, with one of the main goals being limiting the size and scope of the federal government, would definitely expand people's ability to exercise their Second Amendment rights by limiting the federal government's ability to infringe upon them.
So let me go over to Dave Sula. Dave, you are quite the historian. And you challenged me. Thank you for that. But like, you sent me a message today about the Magna Carta and the king and all that. Could you anchor this a little bit in the history?
Okay. I think it was 1215 in England, they did the Magna Carta. And the purpose of that was they had kings at the time that thought they were above the law. And by being above the law, that took the rights away from everybody. So the people with money got together and they come up with the Magna Carta, which said the king is nowhere above the law any longer. So now the people have a Bill of Rights through the Magna Carta. So how we drag that through, as the people in England got more and more disturbed with His Highness over there, they all started coming to the colonies. Okay, and when the founding fathers, and I got to bring up George Mason and James Madison, who was the father of the Constitution, they put in, Madison was a strong believer in Bill of Rights. So basically, we got our independence from England, but we also got our Bill of Rights through a series of things that the English people went through.
I seem to remember learning that eons ago.
Yes.
Thank you for that. So I'll go back over to chat. I think this is a topic for all of us to participate in. What is the Second Amendment for? I don't want to assume, but let's put it out there how each of you see it.
Well, if you get into any of the history of it, and there's various sources for that, Federalist Papers are some, when you start looking at the Constitution. But, as Dave pointed out, it has its genesis in English law. The authorities there trying to keep people from owning guns, and of course that didn't work out well, and that has of course carried over into this country, and we all know what happened when we decided to throw off the crown and go on our own way, the Declaration of Independence and all that, born into the Bill of Rights originally. It was crafted and created to give regular citizens the ability, even the right, to defend themselves against tyranny of all sources and all sorts. But specifically, it was pointed at, the federal government, should it get out of control and decide to become burdensome, as in fact it has today. So we were given the right through the Second Amendment to defend ourselves against a number of threats.
Dave, did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh, being a veteran, and I took an oath, and through that oath, my duties are never done. And along with the Second Amendment, that just establishes a stronger bond for myself.
Now, Travis, you have an interesting take on this. When we had our meeting the other day, would you like to expand?
So when the framers were writing the Constitution and setting up our government, we all know that they set up the legislative, executive, and judicial branches of the government. We all learned this in as early as we can remember. What's not all that expanded upon is, at least in school, is that our government is based off of the concept of the consent of the governed. And the Second Amendment gives the people the right and the ability to revoke our consent to be governed. Kind of giving the people a position as a almost fourth branch of government.
Mm-hmm.
And the Second Amendment empowers we, the people, to make the government listen, especially when they don't listen.
I like the idea of the fourth branch of government that often comes up in many of our Convention of States discussion, because this is a group, this is a movement about taking action, and we are part of the government. So I like how you tie that in with the Second Amendment. I don't have any questions in the chat, but I do have something to bring up, because last year, the governor of California launched a resolution attacking the Second Amendment, and he is looking to do an Article 5 convention to, let me see, what he calls this is the Right to Safety Amendment of the Constitution. Now, little refresher for anyone that already knows us. To get anything like this into motion, any state can put together a resolution. It takes 33 additional states to sign on, to agree, to discuss the exact same agenda. Chet, let me go to you. You want to make a comments about I mean, this is not who we are, but that did make the news last year, and people hear Article 5 convention, and it's easy to get it confused, but there is absolutely no correlation between that and us.
No, there's not, Robin. In fact, in our history, there's something on the order. I believe there have been 40 Article 5 proposals by various states and groups of states in our history. Okay, and they're still out there, still waiting for something to happen. And I think Dave said it earlier. In order, or maybe you did, in order for something like a convention of states, an Article 5 convention of states to happen, you got to get 34 states to sign on. Okay, so Gavin Newsom has got a rather steep hill to climb in trying to get something like this done going forward. He's got to get 34 states to sign on to this thing. And I think, Travis, you mentioned how many constitutional carry states are there?
Currently, there are 27 states that have passed constitutional carry legislation.
Okay, so you got 27 out of 50 states aren't going to go for this. Okay, so you got another, 23 that are going to have to decide what to do. So right away, he's in trouble. Okay, he's not going to be able to get to 34 right out of the starting gate. So the other thing that we need to pay attention to is, okay, so he's taken an Article 5 approach. The federal government has taken an approach through the NFA created in 1934. We keep creating law upon law upon law in this country. And cities like Chicago are no safer today than they were when the NFA was created in 1934. In fact, we've got something in the order of 20,000 federal, state, and local laws that have been created since 1934. So I ask everyone, how has that made cities like Chicago safer?
I think Benjamin Franklin said something that applies quite well right here. He who gives up liberty for temporary safety deserves neither and will lose both.
Yep.
Amen.
So to me, this is a politician who's grandstanding. When you read what was put on paper by Gavin Newsom, whoever did it, he's using all of the headline grabbing words, to get people's attention, to get them to focus on it. That's what they do. They're going to create an emotional argument around this. And this is a very emotional subject. It truly is. But, he's not addressing the root cause problem here, in this country. If you go back and Travis, I know you probably got some of these statistics in your head, but if you go back and look at, gun crime in this country, it is second to a lot of other ways that people die. And it's not even second, it's down the list from the way people die in this country. Okay. So he's not got anything substantial to work on. I think he's just getting ready to make a run for president. So this is one way to get his name out there even more on a national scale. But I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
All right. I see no other words coming about to spill out from any of you, but I definitely thank you for introducing that, because that's out there. He captures the media spotlight, so we can expect to hear it again. And what they're doing in California is not what we're doing. It's not the Convention of States, Article 5 resolution. Let's see. Let me look at some of my other questions here. Chet, you mentioned about this being, it's an emotional topic. And there's a lot of fear around guns, naturally. Yes. I grew up in a household where my father owned guns. I have a healthy respect for guns. There is fear in the fact that I could mishandle a gun. And I'd like to talk for a minute about something all three of you have mentioned in private conversations, and that part of overcoming this fear is the training that can and should be going on around guns. Who wants to take the lead on that?
Travis, why don't you start with your discussion on your training and your coming up, okay?
Well, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I kind of grew up around guns. I actually started learning proper gun safety at around the age of 5, give or take, about 5. And when I was in middle school, I joined my middle school's skeet shooting team at about the age of 12. And through that, not only did I learn just how to shoot things well, I learned proper gun safety and how to respect the device. Because if used improperly, they can hurt people. But if you know how to safely operate it, it can be a really powerful tool to not just say no to the government, but to save the lives of those you care about. on a national level, about, since this is an estimate, since people don't really report crimes that don't happen or are prevented, the CDC estimates that about 50,000 to 500,000 crimes are stopped with the use of firearms every year. Not all of these incidents require a shot to be fired, but just possession of the firearm acts as a deterrent.
So,
Ja-
yeah, one of the things, Travis, as you grew up, the skeet team was certainly a part of all of that. But what took you into, I'm assuming the skeet training did this too, but the ability to take a gun apart, the care for it, where did that come from?
At first, that was just basic gun maintenance. Every time that we shot one of the rifles, it was clean the rifle afterwards. What you taught me was rather basic, but once my passion for firearms kicked in, I wanted to learn how to properly clean them and properly take care of them, so that now that I'm an adult, I want the tool that I hopefully never have to use, but might use to protect my life. I want it to be as reliable as it possibly can be.
So you and I went through some training for our CPL, and maybe talk about that a little bit. I'm coming to a point here. I'm going to switch to Dave after this, but what did we get to our CPL training? What kind of training did they put us through? What did we have to be able to demonstrate and understand?
So most of the class was just learning the laws of defending yourself with a firearm in Michigan. Sure, there was a little bit about proper firearm handling and proper safety. But it was mostly about when are you legally allowed to defend yourself or even brandish a firearm in a legal manner.
Right.
For the practical part, shoot a box of ammo at a plate.
All that does is it helps with the accuracy. The thing that always gets me is, you see on TV, this stuff gets glorified over and over and over on television, but you see these people running around the neighborhoods trying to shoot a handgun single-handed. And I know, and Travis and Dave, you can probably back this up, that there's no way that's safe. There's no way it's even accurate when people start to do something like that, because to hit something, and I, again, from my own target practicing, you got to have two hands on the gun. You got to have the proper stance, all of those things in order to even hit anything. So that's where the training comes in, as to, certainly how to handle it, how to use it, and make it do what it's supposed to do. But, this other stuff is just, it's painting an incorrect and bad picture as media has a tendency to do. Travis, I'm going to ask you something. Do you think there's any translation in some of the gaming that goes on and what happens in real life with guns? Is there any carryover?
In a very superficial way, maybe. And by that, I mean, people know the names of guns. But in a lot of video games, those guns that you get in the games are like machine guns, and they're really difficult to get in the US just because all the infringement that the feds have been doing on the Second Amendment. But it doesn't really translate all that well.
Okay.
Mouse and keyboard to actually holding the firearm, it only in the most superficial way.
Okay. So Dave, I'll come to you next as far as training is concerned. As a military vet, I'm sure you had plenty, right?
Yes, sir.
And what did it do for you?
I learned respect for weapons when I grew up, because we had them in the house growing up, and we never touched them unless Pop got a hold of them, and he took us outside, and we went out and shot like we did when we were kids. Okay, so we knew how to respect the gun. We were not to touch it until it was used for sport or for fun.
Right.
Okay, and I think that back in the 50s and 60s, they taught that in schools. And they had rifle teams, they had skeet teams, but somewhere, I guess, they lost a lot of that. There's still, I read about it all the time, there's still a lot of schools in the country that have rifle teams and skeet teams and clay pigeon teams. So I think they're getting the training and the education they need, but we need to make it a larger scale again.
Yeah.
Okay, because back then women weren't allowed in them classes.
Well, I guess we came along and changed that, didn't we?
I'm at 21. No, I'm kidding. So you know, and for me to see, you know, I taught my grandsons their first weapon that I bought for them was a bolt action. Well, I want a semi-automatic. Nah, that's never going to happen. You're not going to get a weapon that you know nothing about that spews out a clip in 10 seconds. That's not going to happen. You use the bolt and you know where the next shot's going to go. It's going to go down range. So once that they get that inbred in them, and that as they get older, when they got 16, so they got a semi-automatic deer rifle. Because by that time, they had been ingrained that they knew what they were doing with that weapon. And when it fired, they knew where the shot was going to go. Okay. And earlier I told you about 2,300 high school kids at a clay pigeon state championship. Now, these kids not just shot these guns. They carried them around. They cleaned them. They did everything. And for 3 days, nobody got injured. If we stopped teaching this somewhere along the line.
So we've got a question in here, and you guys seem to know some of the history. This question, a couple of them are kind of general. I'm going to put this one up here. How have we allowed all these laws that chip away at our Second Amendment?
Simple. We haven't said no.
Amen.
How has it changed? I mean, explain to somebody like me who's unaware what's happened over the years to chip away at those rights.
So
go ahead, Dave.
They have, okay, a laws, in my mind, as far as the Constitution, has to go through the House, has to go through a committee, it's introduced to the House votes yes, it goes to the Senate, they vote yes, it goes to the president to sign. Okay, we have laws in this country that are against the Constitution, period. These departments, like Department of Homeland, and these different other departments, the IRS, they're all handling weapons now, okay? And they're making laws against weapons. And they're not laws because they're not constitutional. How do we stop that? Because if you break one of their laws, you're still going to go to jail. And you're going to have to get a constitutional lawyer. You're going to have to do this and that. And you still might spend some time in jail. All because it's not a law. It was made up by a department. That's when we get to the third part of our resolution for the Convention of States.
Mm-hmm.
Too big a federal government. And yes, Chet, we are the parents of the federal politicians, and we didn't say no.
Yep, you're right. It's going to make a point, but what happens when this unelected bureaucracy, it's been at work for decades. I mean, you can go back into the early 1900s when all of these bureaucratic agencies were created, and there's something like 400 of them today. The ATF is only one of them. But the way they get around the answer, maybe back to the question that was asked, the way they get around this is through these unelected bureaucratic agencies. You know,
Yep.
you touched on it, Dave, in that, you know, they were set up to be experts in their field, okay? And so because they were identified as experts in their field, whether it was agriculture or education or EP, whatever, you know, they were given carte blanche the ability to use their expertise to write and create whatever laws they deemed appropriate. So same thing applies to these gun laws. I think I said it earlier, there's something on the order of 20,000 federal, state, and local gun laws on the books today. And, you know, you got to separate to some extent the state from the federal. But you got 20,000 laws on the books. And so you couple that with all of the laws, rules, and regulations that have been produced over the last 100 or so years. I think I think I'm going to quote this properly, but we all commit about 4 felonies a day.
A day.
For all of the laws that have been written, still out in the books, and never enforced. Okay, so they write these laws. It's like here in Michigan, they've come up with, I don't know if it was put into the Michigan Constitution or not, but they passed laws where, you know, they're gun safety laws. You got to have locks. You got to lock them up. You got to put them away when the guns are in your house. And that might sound all well and good on the surface, but how in the world do you ever enforce something like that? You know, they're not going to start coming in checking house to house to make sure that my guns are locked and put away. Okay. But, you know, you got so many of these laws, they become unenforceable. They're still on the books, and people will go back to them and bring them up depending on the situation, usually bad, that may be in the public eye at this point. So, you know, we're tripping over ourselves for all of these laws, and of course we're focused here on gun laws, which are in the you know, again, about 20,000 of them. So it's consistent with the way the bureaucracy has worked since the early 1900s, I guess. Is, you know, they use the unelected bureaucracies to create these rules and regulations, and Dave said it right. You know, Congress has nothing to do with it.
Well, they fake you out. They have committees for these departments, and most people buy in that it is actual law because that committee for that House of Representative or the Senate House has a committee for that department, but that's not legal, and that all come about because of the commerce law between New York and New Jersey.
Sure,
that's how we got all those departments.
Well, that's right. I mean, a lot of these have been facilitated by court cases, and specifically by the Supreme Court.
Yep.
There's a number of them that the Supreme Court ruled on that have further enabled, you know, these bureaucrats to write and create more rules and regulations, not laws, but rules and regulations. You know, and it's important to understand that difference. You know, these are not laws, they're rules and regulations.
Right.
Laws are passed and voted on in Congress, and most of the stuff doesn't get voted on in Congress.
I would like to add something to that, and it's about some recent Supreme Court cases, namely EPA versus West Virginia and New York versus Bruin. In the EPA versus West Virginia case, the Supreme Court ruled that executive agencies do not have the authority to redefine things without congressional vote. So, because of that ruling, the bump stock ban and the the pistol brace, whatever you want to call it,
yep,
both got overturned.
Yes, they did.
And Bruin also expanded 2A rights, mostly in New York, where they've been infringed to who knows how long, but it applies nationally. So both of those have been a somewhat hopeful turn in the Supreme Court somewhat recently.
Yep.
They'll twist it somehow where they'll do something stupid, just like they did in Michigan with the red flag laws, which are total disgrace in my mind.
They violate the Second, Fourth, and Fifth Amendments, and
Yep.
arguably the 14th.
Yes, they do. So, and they're enforcing them, because I believe I read that there was 35 people since January that have had their guns removed from their premises.
That's going to get tested in court.
I hope so.
And I think since we're talking about the federal Second Amendment, I think it would be prudent to bring up the Michigan Constitution equivalent of the Second Amendment, which is Article 4, Section 6. It also is just one sentence and it's very broad, which is every citizen has a right to bear arms for the defense of themselves and the state. That's it. It's pretty broad, not as broad as the federal Second Amendment, which is just cannot be infringed. But I think it's worth bringing up.
Well, they didn't have many lawyers back then. Now they got a lot of lawyers. They can interpret any way they want to.
So,
Well, yeah.
So we have a question thrown out here from the audience. Actually, there's been a couple of them, but I put this one up. Can you speak about the zones or areas where guns are not allowed and whether that is good or bad? And I want to remind the audience, these are the opinions of our guests. Guns where guns are not allowed.
I think they've been gun-free zones have been an absolute, just like one of the worst things we could have done. Every mass casualty event, like school shootings, casino shootings, theater shootings, all occur in gun-free zones. And if we want to go to like the entirety of Chicago, we can Chicago's effectively a gun-free zone. And that's turned out super well.
Is that irony that I detect in there?
About the same as a fire truck being on fire.
Yeah, there you go.
I think, I'm not sure that the gun-free zones like schools, I'm not sure that I'm kind of on the fence there. I think you need to have guns available. They need to be, as an example, some schools have these security officers, but the schools have trouble, they have issues, and the local school boards and whatnot vote to have those officers on the premises, for various reasons. And so I think you can make a case for something like that, where a trained person, a law enforcement person best, and can be on the premises and, protect that population pretty effectively. You hear a lot about parents coming in wanting to carry their guns into the school, and there's always issues over those kinds of things because it's unexpected. Whatever you do when it comes to trying to protect, especially schools, there has to be a plan, something in place that people understand. Here's what it is. Here's what's going to happen. Here's what we do, as opposed to trying to do something, either nothing or something that's not well planned out. So I think we have to allow for the fact that there's a way to plan for safety in the use of or the presence of guns, and do it in a way that I think makes some sense.
Well, I'm going to go on the other side of that one, Chet. Down here at Berrien County Courthouse 7-8 years ago, we had an officer escorting a prisoner to the courtroom. The prisoner took the officer's gun and shot him dead. Now, how do you protect from that? Because that was the officer's weapon, which he should have protected with his life. Okay, so how do you allow yourself to be put in a position? Okay, and after that, they said, okay, no more guns. They put in metal detectors. They did everything. So you can't walk in the courthouse anymore down here with anything. You have to go through a metal detector, everything, because of that incident. And I understand where you're coming from. Proper training by the guards, proper training of this, proper training, and it has to do with the attitude of the population. But in this one particular instance, you have a criminal. He sees an opportunity to grab the guard's gun. He shoots him. Is that preventable?
I think, David, in many of those instances, if you were to go back and any of these school shootings, the thing that you don't hear much about is, did they go back and analyze what led up to that incident? And okay. I think in many cases, they find that there were mistakes made. Okay. Right. So you got to work on it. It's like anything else. If you're going to have an incident, a situation, you got to go through some problem solving analysis and understand what led up to the situation. I don't care what it is, whether it's guns, knives, or crochet hooks. You have to understand what led up to that incident and then learn from that so that you can make adjustments. Now, apparently, I don't know if they did that in this case or not, but I'm willing to bet if you were to go back into it, the local police department probably did do some investigating on what happened there, and they know what caused that.
Right. But that's, here, I could use this as an analogy. After our meetings, when I worked at the Cook Nuclear Plant, especially during safety meetings, they would always say all accidents are preventable. Okay. Sure. Now, they got to the point where they were super anal out there when I finally left. And they would say that. And I would raise my hand and I said, did they come up with a cure for stupidity? It doesn't matter how well you plan. Is everybody aboard? Not everybody's aboard. Not everybody hears the same words as you hear.
True.
Okay. And it's the same way with handling firearms. I go out and if I see somebody doing something around me with a loaded weapon, I'm taking it from him. Because he's putting my life in jeopardy. So people around these individuals have to be taught a lesson. You have to bring that out. You have to show them. Maybe he didn't know he was handling the weapon wrong. Maybe that's the way they showed him how to handle it.
Yeah.
Until you correctly show him, he's not going to know.
Right. That's called training.
It probably takes a lot of balls to do that, but I would do that.
Yep.
So let me bring this conversation back around a little bit. I think for as many scenarios as we can put together with guns and accidents and murders and killings, there's definitely a lot of fear. And for as many problems there are solutions. And, we are all human beings and we are imperfect. So attitudes towards gun and gun rights varies from person to person. And we respect that of our audience. Our concern here is about the Constitution. And, I would like to, before we close out here, give all of you a chance to answer this question. Do you think that a convention of states, Article 5 convention, could destroy the Constitution? It's something that I hear. We hear that thrown out. It's driven by fear, in my opinion. But do you think that could happen? That an Article 5 convention could destroy the Constitution?
I do not. And now the answer is how come? So, if you just go back first to the premise for an Article 5 convention of states, the three things we're focused on, okay? Now, term limits is pretty clear. That's something I think most of the country probably would buy into when it comes to our federal government. What people may not understand is that it doesn't only apply to politicians and the elected officials. It could be the unelected folks that come under that umbrella. So we're focused on that. We're focused on the money part of it, which is the fiscal accountability piece. And I personally believe if you do the money right, it takes care of the third one, which is reducing the government size and scope. So we are here in Michigan and in all 50 states where we are working, we have what's called a commissioner selection resolution. How do we select the delegates to attend this convention of states? So you go through, you create that. It's being created. We have a template nationally that all the states are following them. And so when you do that, you decide who goes, how they go, and when they get there, it's one state, gets one vote. But the other piece to this is if they go there and don't behave as they should, there's a penalty phase to this that is going to further control what these commissioners do or don't do. So there's that's an important element in this discussion as to whether or not the Constitution can be attacked. We've amended the Constitution 27 times in our history, and not one word of the Constitution has been changed. It is still intact. It still reads the same today as when the framers created it. So we have amended it, but we have not changed one word in the Constitution, not one. Okay. So now that's another reason why, a convention of states, Article 5 convention of states is not going to destroy the Constitution. Our history shows that that's not going to happen. We're bound by, the directions and the rules we're putting together. We've run 2 simulated events simulating an Article 5 convention, very ordered, very, very well run. Yes, there's vigorous, even, serious debate that goes on in the committees that break out. But when they come to the fore to propose whatever it is they're going to do, it's very ordered, very, very controlled. If you look at any governmental body on C-SPAN, any government group or any subcommittee that runs, you see how they run it. They're in the habit of running according to some rules of order, typically Robert's Rules of Order. So there's a decorum there and a history of running these kinds of events in a very controlled and very manageable way. So to think that anything like this is going to attack and change the Constitution is ridiculous.
Let me go over to Travis. Do you have any fear that a convention of states, that this project that we're working on, that you do support, do you have any fear of it ripping apart the Constitution?
For this specific movement that we are a part of,
Yes.
No, not at all.
Okay.
We've thought about rogue committees, and we have in place ways to mitigate that. So simply, I'm not worried about it.
I'm worried about it. And Dave, what about you?
I never worry about anything.
It must be nice.
Well, we did, if we do our diligent homework, which through Travis and Chet, when it comes out of committee, we've got our commissioner. We've got our rules that we're going to get, so we can't get rowdy at the convention. Okay, that pretty much takes care of everything's going to say, okay, the rules of Roberts are going to prevail over the whole convention. So now, what do we have to worry about? You can't run away because you're tied to the resolution. And the articles of the resolution is what they're going to make into an amendment.
And that is the word on this. This has been, for me, a fun discussion to put together. I know that the Second Amendment is very near and dear to most Americans. And anytime we look at getting any of our rights infringed upon, people take notice. And it's, to me, the fact that we would get attacked, we, Convention of States, would be attacked for trying to change the Constitution to harm the Second Amendment is so far removed. And it says to me that there is more education to be done. I would build for the benefit of anybody watching this that when this convention concludes, they come back with recommendations for amendments. They're not done. They don't get to decide. It goes back out to all the states, and the states decide. It's a process. So it's going to take 38 states to agree on any changes that come out of this Constitution. I'm going to give you each, if you have any last words, but I want to thank you for participating. I know you are all very busy, so I appreciate you taking the time to do this. Dave, you got any last words?
Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get.
That's true. Travis, do you have any words of wisdom for us?
It might be cliche, but a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
It seems pretty clear to me. Chet?
2 points I'll make. We're focused on the wrong things in this country. I think we need to understand why we're so violent. You can say it's mental health, you can say it's a lot of things, but until we understand why we have the amount of violence we have in this country, and it's, guns are a part of that, but so are a whole host of other things too. So we've got to, in this country, we've got to figure out why it is that we're so violent. I can identify a couple things that contribute to that. One is the family is not what it used to be, and our faith in God is not what it used to be. In general, we've kind of lost our way in those two areas. Okay, so to me, we need to be focused on trying to figure that out as a root cause issue. The other thing is our framers were brilliant when they created the Constitution and our government structure. The branches, all of that. It's amazing when you get into more than what we learn in school about what they were thinking and what they had in mind when they created our Constitution. They intentionally put rigor and high bars to get over anytime we wanted to do something like this. They intentionally made it difficult to do. We get asked all the time, what's taking so long? Well, our framers made it hard to do for a reason. You don't do these things willy-nilly and just at the drop of a hat. So
thanks for making that point. Thank you for making that point. Thank you all for participating. I'm going to put you out in the waiting area here while I do a closing and remind you all to please stick around so that we can get the downloads on your video. Dave, Travis, Chet, thank you all very much. And Dave. And that brings us back to here. You've heard opinions from some of our grassroots members. What did you decide? Is a convention of states, is it Article 5 resolution, is it good or is it bad for the Second Amendment or for us? If you like what you heard, you heard Chet mention, people ask, why is it taking so long? There's a variety of reasons, and one of the reasons is we've got to build our grassroots, and that's what we're doing here in Michigan. And I'm going to give you the opportunity to do that. Take out your phone, scan this QR code, and sign the petition. When you do, a letter will go to your state representatives here in Michigan, letting them know that you support Convention of States and that you would like them to support this resolution going forward. So we'll send those letters for you. You'll get on our mailing list and you'll get mail and information from us. That's a minimum. That's signing a petition. Now, are you ready to do something? We don't sit here on the couch. This is not who we are. We are a group of people who are activists. We get up off the couch and do something. We have so many volunteer roles within this organization. We have roles that fit your personality, your time schedule. If you don't like to be front facing out there in the world, we need information analysts. We need writers, social media warriors, videographers. If you like to be out and meet and greet people, I would encourage you to become a district captain like Dave, a region captain like Chet. Help organize and build our volunteer groups across the U.S. What do you need to know to do this? Everybody gets training, free training that is available to everyone that will help you relearn what you already know about the Constitution. It will help you with understanding the words that we see, what it's like to be a volunteer in an organization. So if that appeals to you, snap that QR code and do that as well. Before I wrap up, I want to give a special announcement. And I'm inviting all of you to join us in Lansing on Saturday, June 1st for a Freedom Rally ride to the Capitol. If you believe in self-governance, if you are ready to take action, join us. If you're a rider, ride. The bikers are going to go around the Capitol building. We're going to meet at Capitol Harley-Davidson. You can see on the flyer here, the registration is at noon. There'll be some speakers. We're going to have food trucks. There'll be the ride, come back, socialization. This is a big event. And again, whether you walk, you ride, you bring your car, it doesn't matter. We will be at Capitol Harley-Davidson on Saturday, June 1st. So give us a chance. We are not about deciding what should happen. We are about who decides. And if that resonates with you, then please sign up, join in, and stay with the fight. Thank you for joining us.